Welcome to Primetime News here on TV1. You're with me, Disal Kapage. Before we get into the news in detail, let's first take a look at the headlines.
Jatika Jana Balavegaya protests in Nugegoda demands a new mandate. US Congress urges US Secretary of State to ensure Sri Lankan government does not use violence against peaceful demonstrators. Do not use Terrorism Act against protesters. Amnesty International urges the government. Hirunika arrives at CID. 6-hour statement recorded. Team Dallas prepares for a new journey.
මේක ගමනක ආරම්භයක් නුදුරු අනාගතයේ අපට සිදු වෙනවා රට වෙනුවෙන් වැදගත් තීරණ කිහිපයක් ගැනීමට
අසමත්කමේ වගකීමත් අපි බෙදා හදා ගන්නවා. ඒ සාධාරණ ඉෂ්ට කරන්නට ඕන ඒ ජනතාවට.
And now in your top story, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that steps have been taken to provide adequate fertilizer to the required for the Maha season to farmers without delay.
Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe was in Anuradhapura on Saturday to visit several temples and shrines and to meet with the Mahasangha. The head of state called on Most Venerable Dr. Pallegama Sirinivasathera, the Atamasthanathipati and the Chief Sanghanayaka of the North Central Province.
Excavation work at the temple is taking place expeditiously. Also, we have now brought down the fertilizer. Next, we are looking to provide fertilizer, especially for crops like tea, rubber, coconut and cinnamon. The poultry industry can only be protected if maize can be harvested. Our focus is on the Yala season. We are providing the necessary fertilizer. In addition, the ADB, World Bank and the US, along with other agencies, are funding the fertilizer procurement for the Maha season. We hope to import MO peat and TS peat in addition to urea. We will focus on the fuel availability as well.
The President paid reverence to the Ruwanwali Mahasaya and thereafter called on Venerable Pallegama Hemarathanathera, the Chief Sanghanayaka of the Nuwara region.
Individuals have different unique talents, so what you don't have is from the other person, isn't it? It's an opportunity to come together and to do something for the country.
Later, the President visited the historic Lankaramaya Viharaya and received the blessings of Venerable Ranapanave Dhammajotithera, the Chief Prelate of the Lankaramaya Viharaya.
The opportunity has now been given to implement 7 imperishable dharma. Gather together, unite and discuss this. Unite and depart. They should treat the people of this country like their own children. So everyone should rally around the President.
The Jatika Jana Balavegaya, or the National People's Power, held a protest march today under the theme Dissolve Parliament and Make Way for the People's Mandate.
The protest march was held demanding the government dissolve parliament and make way for the people's mandate. The march began from the Vijayarama Junction in Nugegoda. The group marched towards the Ananda Samarkund Open Air Theatre. I hope you can remember, recently Ranil Wickremesinghe said in his speech in Parliament that there was an Aragalaya and that there were terrorists involved in the Aragalaya. We were waiting to see who these terrorists are that he hopes to arrest. One used the pool at the president's house. The other used the washroom there. The next slept on the president's flag. Another man was arrested for eating the papaya that was inside the refrigerator at the president's house, while another was arrested for counting the money that was found at the premises. On the 18th, the IUSF staged a protest. It was a protest march from Lipton roundabout to Fort. The police dispersed the protesters by attacking them. Ranil is someone who watches from the sidewalk and then attacks. We came from Delkand at Nugegoda, a peaceful protest. If you attacked us, we wouldn't have stopped at Nugegoda. IUSF convener Vasantha Mudalige was arrested. A detention order was issued for 72 hours. If one is arrested, within 48 hours, he or she should be produced before court, and the court must decide if he will be granted bail or if he will be imprisoned. But what happened here is they used the PTA as a tool. But Ranil, I must say, the days you frightened us, you were young, now you've aged. When Susil goes to a university, the children hoot. And Bandula goes to a bus opening. Why must a minister go to launch a bus? The people of this country don't approve of these rulers. Hundreds of people took to the streets, hoping for something. That is a system change. We say the people's power is needed for this. And that is the power of the JJB, nothing else.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the country went bankrupt because the people chose the wrong path.
The people chose a wrong path during both the presidential and general elections. The country has gone bankrupt today because of this wrong path. If the people chose the right path, they would never have been subjected to this kind of discomfort and pressure. That's because we practice humanitarian capitalism. Now we need to get rid of this wrong path. Today the political field has become a gambling market. Today MPs are sold for money, not in rupees but in dollars. They're trying to assert their power by promoting the all-party government. They're building a cabinet of 35 ministers and 35 state ministers. Friends, this is not the time to focus on the 70. This is the time to focus on the people of Sri Lanka.
The Samagi Vanitha Balavege member Hirunika Premachandra provided a statement for almost 6 hours at the CID today.
Hirunika Premachandra entered the Criminal Investigation Department at around 11 a.m. today and walked out of the premises at 5 p.m.
Ranil Rajapaksa is acting according to the whims and fancies of those in the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. They are all resentful over the fact that their houses were set on fire. The SLPP always creates their tagline by using a crisis. This is how they carry out their political agendas. The SLPP's next tagline to come into power is saving the country from revolutionary fascists. The violence, including the incidents where MPs' houses were set on fire, is being blamed on the Aragalaya. I clearly understood that from their questions today. I'm repeating myself. Please don't destroy the lives of these youngsters, including Vasantha Mudalige. Don't harass them. A proper leader would be proud of these youngsters coming forward instead of being angry. Like we always say, the Aragalaya is not over.
Police have sought public assistance in identifying 50 suspects who entered temple trees and caused property damage.
The Police Media Division says the related investigations will be conducted by the Criminal Investigations Division of Colombo Crimes Division. Photographs of the suspects have been released to the public as well. The police say members of the public can contact them via 011 242 1867, 076 347 7342 or the 1997 hotline if they have information.
Sri Lanka Police has requested the Defence Ministry for permission to further detain and interrogate Inter-University Students Federation convener Vasantha Mudalige, Hashan Gunatilaka and another under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Police says 3 activists are currently being detained and interrogated for 72 hours. 19 people were arrested by Sri Lanka Police on Thursday, the 18th of August, following a protest in Colombo. 16 were later released on personal bail, but 3, including IUSF convener Vasantha Mudalige, were not released on bail.
The Inter-University Students' Council called a press conference today and expressed its views on the arrest of student activists under the PTA.
Why is Ranil Wickremesinghe creating this environment? For what purpose? We wish to state that no matter what attempts are made to arrest, intimidate or suppress our struggle, hundreds and thousands of activists will continue to take this forward in the right direction.
Attorney at law Nuwan Bobage visited the detained student activists today at the Valikada prison.
The three activists are being detained under the PTA. Firstly, if someone is being detained under the PTA, the police can only detain them for 72 hours. Once the 72 hours period is completed, the subject minister can issue a detention order for 3 months. When that period is completed, another detention order of 1 year can be issued. The PTA doesn't allow those detained to be released on bail. The protest on Thursday was not an act of terrorism. The activists are being detained and interrogated because they are involved in the Aragale. Is the Aragale an act of terrorism? As soon as Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed as the Prime Minister, he appointed Ruwan Wijewardena to look into the Aragale and make arrangements to support the movement. If the Aragale is an act of terrorism, will Ranil Wickremesinghe be arrested under the Section 2 of the Prevention of Terrorism Act for supporting the Aragale?
Many from the legal fraternity commented on how the PTA is being used to quell protesters.
The PTA should be used to protect people from terrorists. What is Ranil Wickremesinghe doing? It appears that he is using the PTA to protect terrorists from the people. The real terrorists are those who have stolen the country's wealth through ports, airports and towers. The real terrorists are destroying the country's wealth and the people's lives through scams such as the sugar and garlic scams. We can see that the SLPP thugs are being pampered while they work towards building an autocratic leadership.
අර පොහොට්ටුවේ මැරයන්ගේ හුරතලා බවට පත් වෙලා සමස්තයක් වශයෙන්ම ඒකාධිපති පාලනයකට අරන් දිනුවයි කියලා ඊටාම පැහැදිලි වෙනවා.
අපි කියනවා මේ ආණ්ඩුවට අපි මේකට බය නැහැ.
We'd like to inform the government that we are not afraid of this. As a legal fraternity, we will go to the Supreme Court and prove the illegal nature of this. Not just that, we are saying that Mudalige's detention order is only valid for 72 hours. Now the government is trying to get the signature of the Defence Secretary and extend it up to 90 days. We say that this will be a very dangerous step. Don't wait for the international community to protect the democracy of this country. Acting within the framework of the law is the only way for this government to survive at this time.
Day before yesterday, the government has arrested some student activists who staged a protest march near Lipton Circus. The leaders of that protest, the General Secretary of the IUSF and 2 others, have been arrested and have been detained for 72 hours for questioning. In addition to this, permission has also been sought to keep them for 3 months under detention order obtained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Now this is a very serious issue because, as everyone knows, the Prevention of Terrorism Act ought to be repealed. Previously, the government headed by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, when he was Prime Minister, assured everyone that it would be repealed. In fact, it was to be replaced by another act. We have launched a massive campaign, a signature campaign for the repeal of the PTA, and most people have supported that. In the backdrop of all of this, the government also had given an undertaking that they will impose a moratorium on the use of PTA, and that was holding until now. Now to suddenly resurrect the PTA, that is about to be taken off the statute books, is a very, very serious issue. We condemn this act of the use of PTA, and we demand that the government release these persons who are said to have been detained under the PTA and also repeal the PTA forth.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa tweeted, quote, "We must protect those that exercise instead of persecuting them by weaponizing the PTA," end quote. The opposition leader urged the government to act in the best interest of the people, the country and democracy.
Amnesty International South Asia has urged the government of Sri Lanka to not use the Prevention of Terrorism Act against protesters for their acts of civil disobedience.
In a series of tweets, Amnesty International South Asia said it is deeply concerned by reports that convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation, Wasantha Mudalige, is currently being held at the Terrorism Investigation Division by authorities. It said, quote, "We urge the Sri Lankan government to not use the draconian anti-terror law, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, against protesters for their acts of civil disobedience," unquote. Amnesty International South Asia called on the government of Sri Lanka to repeal the PTA instead. The human rights group highlights that arbitrarily detaining protesters and charging them with serious criminal offences that are not justified by their actions, such as terrorism-related charges, is against international law.
10 members of the US Congress have urged the US Secretary of State to use all diplomatic means available to ensure that the Sri Lankan government protects the rights of citizens to protest and does not use violence against peaceful demonstrators and journalists.
In a letter directed to the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and the US Aid Administrator Samantha Power, the congressmen and women have also requested the administration to provide Sri Lanka with additional swift action as meaningful support to the Sri Lankan people in their time of need, pointing out that the newly appointed President Wickremesinghe announced a state of emergency, placed the nation under curfew, denounced the protest and even suggested the use of live ammunition in quelling them. The congressmen have requested the US State Department to continue to use all diplomatic means available to ensure the Sri Lankan government protects the rights of suffering citizens to peacefully protest and does not utilize violence against peaceful demonstrators and journalists. The statement urges to fully incorporate measures supporting the stabilization of Sri Lanka. The measures include advancing efforts to address long-standing issues related to accountability and reconciliation and improving democratic institutions in Sri Lanka to meet the US foreign policy goals of the region. The letter also urges the US aid to take immediate action to provide relief to the Sri Lankan people, including increased food, medical and fuel aid. The letter highlights that US aid provide $11.75 million in new humanitarian and development assistance at the end of June, adding quote-unquote, "More is clearly needed now."
In other news related to reactions to this situation, people held a protest at the Liberty roundabout in Colombo this evening.
Still, we don't see any difference, any changes from the government, and we are not arguing against anything. We just want all the unlawful arrests and all the matters to be solved.
So there is a hole in the bucket, that is the constitution. Instead, we have to change or throw the bucket and get one strong bucket with transparency, accountability, and the right for expression and everything.
The IMF staff plans to visit Colombo between the 24th and 31st of August to continue discussions with the Sri Lankan authorities on economic and financial reforms and policies. This is according to an IMF staff statement on Sri Lanka.
According to the statement, the objective is to make progress towards reaching a staff-level agreement on a prospective IMF extended fund facility arrangement in the near term. The statement goes on to say that because Sri Lanka's public debt is assessed as unsustainable, approval by the IMF Executive Board of the extended fund facility program would require adequate assurances by Sri Lanka's creditors that debt sustainability will be restored. It adds that the IMF staff would also continue the engagement with other stakeholders during the visit. The IMF statement concludes saying the team will be led by Peter Brewer and Masahiro Nozaki.
The repealing of the Prevention of Terrorism Act was discussed in Jaffna today.
Regional Director of the United Nations Development Coordination Office, David McLachlan-Carr, and United Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka, Hannah Singer, met with Mayor of Jaffna today.
We informed the UN representatives that the PTA should be completely repealed. The incumbent president had previously said that the PTA will be repealed. When he was the Prime Minister, he had also co-sponsored the United Nations Human Rights Commission resolution. However, no action in this regard has been taken. The PTA should be completely repealed, and we informed the UN representatives about this.
In the meantime, David McLachlan-Carr said they discussed the need for meaningful reconciliation and development in the north.
Interesting meeting with the mayor of Jaffna. The conversation surrounded the United Nations support for the people of Northern Province, its development aspirations, where we can assist with intercommunal reconciliation, which is a big priority for the United Nations in Sri Lanka, but particularly here in Jaffna, which is recovering from a long period of civil war. During our visit, we've also talked to the mayor about our conversations with representatives of victims of conflict, of the disappeared, and how we can assist them to find closure and to find peace through justice and through the process of healing and reconciliation. The mayor also explained to us the priorities for the development of Jaffna, which we are taking back with us to Colombo, but also to discuss with other development partners and with the United Nations system.
Now, in another significant development today, Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe issued an extraordinary gazette summoning the tri-forces for the maintenance of public order in the country.
As per the extraordinary gazette, the Sri Lanka Army, Sri Lanka Navy and the Sri Lanka Air Force have been called out for the maintenance of public order in all districts across Sri Lanka. The tri-forces will be summoned from Monday, the 22nd of August. The extraordinary gazette was issued by the President under the powers vested in him by Section 12 of the Public Security Ordinance.
The Samagi Jana Balavege has called for all processes that curtail the basic human rights should be immediately withdrawn.
The Samagi Jana Balavege called for all processes that curtail the basic human rights of Sri Lankans to be immediately withdrawn and to release the detained student activists. In a statement, the SJB also cited the President's sentiments about allowing for freedom of speech and said that these repressive actions are being carried out under the guise of the emergency law. SJB General Secretary Ranjit Madhuma Bandaras said the actions of the President contradicts with his statement on lifting the emergency law, as he has issued an extraordinary gazette summoning the tri-forces to maintain public order in 7 districts.
A group of parliamentarians who supported MP Dallas Alahaperuma at the recent election for the presidency of Sri Lanka visited Anuradhapura today and engaged in multiple religious activities.
The group of parliamentarians visited the Ruwan Valley Mahasaya in Anuradhapura and obtained blessings.
This is just the beginning of the journey. We will have to make certain important decisions for the country. I believe that it is right to begin our work before the Sri Mahabodhi and the Ruwan Valley Mahasaya.
The group of parliamentarians then held a media briefing.
Don't disrespect the 6.9 million people. We had big hopes of doing something great for Sri Lanka, but we failed to do so. We must do justice to the people. We must protect that trust. This is our ultimate goal. Let's now cross over to a short commercial break and come back for more news.
නිවෙසපුරා ගලන මේ සතුට සුරක්ෂිත කරන්නේ එස්ලෝන් ඉන්සයිට්. එස්ලෝන් ජීවයයි ජලය ජීවිතේ.
Welcome back to the news. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara says the Sapugaskanda oil refinery commenced operations today. In a tweet, he said 100,000 metric tons of crude oil is being discharged. He says Sri Lanka expects to receive a second crude oil cargo of 120,000 metric tons next week. The tweet added, with the two cargoes, the refinery will be able to operate at full capacity for 40 days. Minister Wijesekara says that a jet fuel cargo will also be unloaded tonight. Now in your international news, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has said UN officials will be granted permission to visit and inspect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear complex.
The Kremlin made the announcement after a call between Russian leader Vladimir Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron. It came as claims of fighting near the plant continued, with 4 civilians reportedly injured by Russian shelling. Separately, the US pledged on Friday to send more arms and ammunitions to assist the Ukraine war effort. In a readout following the call between the French and Russian leaders, the Kremlin said Putin had agreed to provide UN investigators with the necessary assistance to access the Zaporizhzhia nuclear site. The plant has been under Russian occupation since early March, but Ukrainian technicians still operate it under Russian direction.
Let's first take a look at your sports news. Royal College Colombo won the first leg of the 76th Bradby Shield annual rugby encounter against Trinity College Kandy today. Considered to be the pinnacle of schools rugby in Sri Lanka, the eagerly awaited clash was held today after a hiatus of 2 years.
The first leg of the 76th Bradby Shield annual encounter was held today at the Royal College Sports Complex in Colombo. In the first half of the game, Royal showed great teamwork and took a 10-0 lead. They scored another 19 points in the second half. Trinity College, however, failed to score any points in the second half as well. Royal College ended the game handsomely with the scorecard rating 29-0. The second leg of the Bradby Shield annual encounter is scheduled to be held on the 3rd of September at the Trinity College Rugby Stadium in Pallekele, Kandy. The winner will be decided on aggregate points at the end of both stages to claim the coveted Bradby Shield. Trinity leads Royal in Bradby encounters head-to-head. Trinity have won 39 victories overall, while Royal has won 34.
Now taking a look at some more local news, the Consumer Affairs Authority issued an extraordinary gazette notification last night imposing a maximum retail price for eggs.
According to the extraordinary gazette, the maximum retail price of a white egg is 43 rupees, while the maximum retail price of a brown egg is 45 rupees, with effect from midnight yesterday. What is the situation in the market? Even though there is a maximum retail price for eggs, the traders say that they cannot sell their eggs for that price.
ඉස්සල්ලාම විධිමත් සැලැස්මක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ රජයට එක දවස් රැකින් දාපු ගමන් පාලන මිලක් කරන්න බෑ.
ලිටර් මිල 61යි 60යි. දැන් ඉතින් විතර නෑ.
ඒ සහෝදර අඩු කරලා දෙන්නම් කියලා තියෙනවා අපිට දාන කට්ටිය. කීයක් අඩු කරයිද දන්නේ. ඒත් අද තුනට දෙන්න.
Did consumers get relief from the price controls?
65යි අඩු කරලා නැහැ සතයක්වත්.
බිත්තරයක් රුපියල් 60යි 62යි 63යි. පාලන මිලක් නැහැ. කඩේකට ඇවිල්ලා බලන්න කියන්නකෝ යමතිලාට පාලන මිලක් තියනවද කියලා.
Do egg producers agree to this price?
The production cost of an egg has gone up to 48 rupees. The egg has to be sold to the farmer for 35 rupees. We request the government to take this into consideration and go for a price of at least 50 rupees.
නිෂ්පාදන වියදම ගැන අබමල් රේණුවකටවත් හිතන්නේ නැතුව අමනෝඥ තීන්දුවක් මේ අරන් තියෙන්නේ. බිත්තරේ 43ට දෙන්නේ කොහමද? අද අමුද්‍රව්‍ය මිල 100ට 400කින් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
What are the reasons for the increase in the price of eggs? If the problem is the increase in the price of animal feed, we ask the breeders whether it is okay to set a control price for an egg without lowering the price of animal feed. We have a reasonable suspicion that this impractical gazette was issued on the basis of preparations to import eggs to Sri Lanka.
What does the Ministry of Food Security say?
This is not an injustice to the producer and the consumer. After discussions, they have come to an agreement, and the Consumer Affairs Authority has made a fair calculation. The cost of credit facilities has also been taken into consideration. These people have made a request which they lost in the past. Now, to make up for it, should we give them the opportunity to increase the price of these eggs? That's not something we can approve.
Now,
that is also decided by the manufacturer. If they start to behave like that, if the goods required by the people are lost or reduced, then we will import anything. The same goes for eggs and chickens.
The third phase of the Divisavia program continues to assist poverty-stricken families in Sri Lanka as the economic crisis continues to grip our nation tighter each day. Today's program, supported by LOLC Holdings, took place in the Newsfirst district.
The 15th day of the third phase of the Divisavia program took place today. Essential relief packages were distributed to poverty-stricken families in 2 areas across the Newsfirst district. The Divisavia program, supported by LOLC Holdings, identifies families that are facing serious financial issues and provides them with much-needed relief packages.
News First with the people.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News here on TV1. For details of these stories and much more, follow us on our social media platforms and our award-winning website. As always, thank you for watching, and do take care and have a good night.